one other thing I had to say, that Mark was able to find you through the,
National Veteran Speakers Week program.
thank you very much. A warm welcome.
Hey, there we go, snap time everyone. All right, thank you for that lovely introduction. If I do speak too quickly or too loud, please put your hand up. I do have a hearing loss condition. God bless the Canadian Armed Forces and lack of hearing protection. I also have tinnitus. So I'm hearing things that probably aren't going on. So if I do say pardon or can you speak up, it's not because I'm not paying attention. I did that with my ex-wife and it caused me gravely. It's just because I really can't hear you. So, some of what I'm about to say in the next minute or so will probably just be a quick rehash of that wonderful introduction we had. So, it's my privilege and honor actually to be standing in front of all of you as part of the National Veteran Speakers Week program. This is the second year that I've done this consecutively, but throughout my career I've had the opportunity at Remembrance Day services, Operation Connection, where we were out in the local community showing off our wonderful green vehicles when they still worked. Talking with the local populace. Why? Because as a steward of the institution, the profession of arms, one of my key responsibilities is actually accountability to the Canadian public. That's almost like his geopolitical class that I didn't pay attention to in high school. So, a little bit about myself. I was actually born in Etobicoke, don't let that get out. I was 6 months old when my family decided to move up to Barrie. I say Barrie because it's the closest major city centre that most people in Canada can recognize. I actually grew up on Mapleview, the old 12th line in Isville, and the 25th Side Road. It didn't have a name, it didn't belong to Painswick, Elkona, or Stroud, or Honey Harbour, or anything. It was a rural route. I'm a bit of a farm boy, that's okay. I plugged groundhogs for a living when I was 12 years old. And a good friend of mine had a horse farm. If anybody's ever met the Bernies, that's where I did a lot of my work. So I enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces at 16 and a half in 1998. I actually asked my mom, can you sign my permission slip so I can go do dangerous things with unlimited liability? She shook her head and goes, yes. My father didn't have to say anything because he was sitting in the corner with a big happy grin. Go ahead, excellent. I am approaching my 25th year of service. I'm only 41 right now. I'll be 42 with 25 years of service. I could have retired 5 years ago, but I haven't gotten sick and tired of what I do just quite yet. I've been deployed operationally 4 times overseas. I have 3 operational deployments, war fighting in Afghanistan for a total of about 562 days. And I just recently returned from the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt this July. I have done numerous domestic support operations, so when you think of domestic operations, forest fires, floods, support to the Olympics, G20 summits, I've been kind of directly and indirectly involved with quite a few of them. I won't be touching on a lot of them because the majority of that I was with the Canadian Special Operations Forces Command, people who don't exist, and some of the operations we conducted due to security classifications I'm not privy to discuss in this open forum. So what do? Well, as we all know, the Canadian Armed Forces and any other government entity loves to give a title that sounds important. I'm a mobile support equipment operator. What does that mean? I'm a truck driver. Real big, fancy job title to say I'm a truck driver. The short and form of it is MSC Op, or as everybody outside the trucking industry likes to say, me start engine oops. Before then, I was an infantry soldier with 2 platoon mission company in Barrie, Ontario, a part of the Grade Simcoe Foresters. It's interesting that I am posted to CFB Borden because the 147th and 157th Overseas Battalion of the Grade Simcoe Foresters, which comprise Collingwood, Midland, Barrie, Owen Sound, which is now just Barrie and Owen Sound, actually constructed CFB Borden. The first 6 soldiers on CFB Borden proper were 6 military police officers from the 147th. So every time somebody really, really upsets me or annoys me at work, I go, just remember, this is my base, my regiment built it. But I loved what I did as an infantry. I loved shooting. I was a qualified mortarman on the 81 millimeter. I was a machine gunner, a radio operator. But I decided if I was going to make a full-time career of this, upon retirement, I might have needed something that I can do that does not involve kicking open doors and shooting guns. Options were extremely limited. So my father looked at me when I said I'm joining the regular force as a truck driver. He smiled, he smirked, and he said to me directly, "Who's the dumb truck driver now?" My father enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces with the Royal Canadian Army Service Corps in 1951, out of Toronto. Then it became 2 Toronto Service Battalion out of Denison Armories. After unification in '68, it then became 2-5 Service Battalion, which is now 32 Service Battalion. A little bit of trucking history, a little bit of military history. My uncle was with the Royal Canadian Dragoons in Petawawa. Unfortunately, he was killed by a DUI back in 1972. Ironically, if my father and him didn't switch spots, I wouldn't be speaking to you today. But enough doom and gloom. I mean, this presentation is going to be a roller coaster. We're going to go up, we're going to go down, we're going to have a good time, maybe cry. It's all good. So this presentation has been given to people as young as 8, and I like to say we're a more seasoned crowd. So I don't mind going into a little bit more details that I can't necessarily share with somebody who is like in grade 5. But at any time, if you feel a little uncomfortable or uneasy, by all means, step up, walk outside of the room. I'm sharing with you my experiences through 4 operational deployments. Some of it is very traumatizing to myself. This is not group therapy, but if we all start crying, I'll feel a little bit better about myself. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we actually do as truck drivers in the Canadian Armed Forces. Then we're going to go through a time warp of 13 years, talking about Afghanistan, various rotations thereof, my time in Egypt, something very important to myself, which is the unseen casualties of war. And then we're going to open up the floor to questions. Apparently the floor is uneven. So, what is it exactly I do? Well, I'm a truck driver. Plain and simple. Anything that you see rolling down the 400, 27, 89, anywhere in the world that's a commercial pattern vehicle, my job is to operate it. I don't drive it, I operate it. I'm responsible for delivering food, rations, water, mail, cookies, you name it. Just think of us as Amazon for the Canadian Armed Forces. If you ask for it, the truck's going to bring it. However, that's more the general support side of the house, peacetime operations. The vehicle that you see on the top right-hand side for myself, your left, is a vehicle that has been retired, unfortunately. But that is the 16-ton super heavy logistics vehicle wheeled. It is a palletized container moving vehicle. It was actually produced in Germany by Steyr back in 1982. And the Canadian Armed Forces still has about 4 of them that are operational, but we can't get parts anymore because the contract expired years ago. Anytime you see one of the green vehicles rolling down the road, that is what we're actually using on our international operations and for specific domestic operations here. I spent 14 years in a field organization doing close combat resupply training, training drivers how to do so. Tactics, techniques, and procedures is the big fancy terminology that we use. But also getting a lot of experience under my belt on how to secure loads, how not to put the truck in the ditch with 42 people in the back of it. It happens. I loved refueling. I was a refueling tender operator for years. I always had a shower. And everybody's seen the septic trucks that drive around. That's us as well. I operated the honey wagon. There was a lot of good ideas that I cleaned out on a daily basis. Let's just leave it at that. However, part of my role as being in a field unit is I had to been able to fight and defend myself, the convoy, and the individuals under my charge and care. The picture on the bottom hand, my left, your right side of the screen, was taken in 2005 in CFB Petawawa during our workup training to go back to Afghanistan. I was 22-ish 23 years old in that picture. That's not a pack of cigarettes in my hand, I swear to God. It is. And this was during a convoy debrief. When we first initially rolled into Afghanistan, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, we were out in Wainwright, Alberta doing a brigade level concentration, so about 1,500 soldiers from Petawawa and some augmentees from Edmonton, getting ready to deploy to Bosnia, rotation 13. When the brigade commander came down to all his commanders and simply said, half of you are going to Bosnia, the other half of you are going to go to Afghanistan. And the majority of us went, Afghan where? I mean, most of us knew Afghanistan from Rambo 3. Like, I'm not gonna lie, we're like, where is this country? So, that's just a little bit about what we do. Currently my job get out and walk. As a company sergeant major, is I am the transportation training cadre sergeant major for all the truck drivers in the Canadian Armed Forces. All training and development, training refresher, maintenance and lesson plans, falls under my care and control. I have a staff of 52, primarily master corporals, about mid-level management, low-end supervisor, if you will. And I pump through annually about 700 to 1,000 soldiers a year through national training. CFP Border alone pushes through 16,000 soldiers a year through the training regime. Kind of busy. But it's not all fun and games. We all know winter's coming. Who does not have their snow tires on? That's okay. Varying opinions, right? But as an MSC op, we're prone to periods of high stress due to deadlines, long driving hours, climatic conditions. Even though it's a heated cab, we still work no matter what the weather is. And of course, there's the occupational hazard of somebody dropping a 2,000 liter refueling trailer on top of your head if you're not paying attention. To put it in context, if we were operating in a traditional battlefield space, envision, if you will, the front edge of the battle area is North Bay. That's where all the fighting is going on between the two known factions. Us MSC ops are hanging out, well, somewhere in this area. Sleeping during the day, we hope. As the sun starts to set, we get into our trucks, we drive up to about Powassan, where we start exchanging everything on our trucks, from commodities, fuel, and getting the next day's request. And then we turn our trucks around, we drive all the way down to Lakeshore in Toronto, resupply our trucks, and we hopefully drive back up to this area. Now if the battle moves forward, we start moving forward, but the resupply area in Toronto stays until things get more and more secure. On average, we operate about 9 to 14 hours in a modern battle space. My record is 96 hours without sleep, 2 liters of water, and 1 ration back. I was just continuously going, supporting the armored squadron. The truck stayed on the road, but at one point I drove through something that was not there, and I looked at my platoon commander and said, I think I need to take a nap, and they woke me up 5 days later. It was really fun, actually. It might be a little hard to see in behind the forklift. Let's see if I don't make a fashion faux pas here. That is a Setra bus. It's actually painted green. They're fantastic buses. It's European design, and you can turn around in about 2.5 parking stalls, unlike North American buses. But let's talk about what I really know well about my career. The Afghanistan years. So when we think about Afghanistan, exactly where is it? It's 10,147 kilometers away from the city of Toronto, or a quarter distance away around the world. From a geography standpoint, how do we identify it? Well, if you take your hand, kind of give a crooked thumbs up, it's roughly the shape of Afghanistan.
Sorry.
It's all good, don't worry about it.
I thought it was off.
We didn't give the precursor. Please make sure all your phones are silent. It's awesome.
Okay, can you hold your hand up again?
Yeah, so if you kind of rotate your hand like that a little bit, that's what Afghanistan looks like. It's a little crooked country, and oddly enough, it fits inside Alberta with room to spare. The capital city of Kabul, when I left the 3rd time, had approximately 11 million people living inside it. And the city was only designed for the footprint of Ottawa, which currently sits at 999,200 and something, or let's just say for argument's sake, 1 million people. So what's it like? Who's been to the C&E? That's exactly what it's like, taking 16-ton, 30-ton trucks, driving through the C&E at 100 kilometers an hour without trying to hit a thing. Food vendors, donkeys, grocery carts. It's like driving through the C&E. The other way that you can really find it, it's in the corner of Southwest Asia, and it's surrounded by the stands. Turkmenistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan is in there. Of course, you have Iraq and Iran. And sadly, where I was just recently, I was about a 4.5-hour flight from Kabul. I'm like, well, could always go back and visit my old stopping grounds, but that's not. So, all of us are very familiar with the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001. North American Treaty Organization, NATO, has a mutual defense pact called Article 5. You attack one of us, we will all retaliate in force. Because of the attacks that claimed the 3,400 lives in the city of New York, plus the flights, the United States government said retribution is how we're going to proceed with this. So in early October, the Canadian Armed Forces said we will support, and Prime Minister Jean Chrétien also said we are not going into Iraq. And we deployed the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry under Op Enduring Freedom Afghanistan, or the Canadian mission, Op Apollo, to remove and eliminate the Taliban from Kandahar City. This is where we experienced our first 4 casualties of the conflict, 4 members of the Princess Pats. And oddly enough, the company commander on the ground at the time, Lieutenant Jason Adair, who was a former cadet instructor cadre member that I had, was the platoon commander. Their company sergeant major, Billy Bullen, the most politically incorrect man I've ever met in my career, was their company sergeant major. Billy did not leave that site at Tanark Farms until the last casualty was pulled off the ground, approximately 14 hours after the ill-fated airstrike killed 4 of his troops. When we first rolled into Kandahar in 2005 from up north, they introduced us to the Taliban Last Stand, which is a building where they all decided to say, guns a-blazing, this is where we're going to die. And there was numerous bomb impact craters through the roof with burnt silhouettes on the walls from where they stood at their last stand. However, again, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not. So why is this part of my presentation? Well, September 11th, 2001, I just had 1 year out of high school. My 2nd year in the Canadian Armed Forces as a member of the Grand Central Foresters. At 8:30 in the morning, when the TV channels broke the news, drinking my coffee, talking with my parents, my phone rang. Be prepared to come into work. Nobody knew what was going on. The Reserve Force said, we might have to mobilize, just be prepared. And quite honestly, as we watched everything unfold across the globe, and I'm sure most of us do remember that ill-fated day, the first thing that started going through my mind and many other minds in the Canadian Armed Forces is, we're going to war. Something that's probably not really been uttered in this country since 1951, when we went into Korea. And during that time period, I actually had my application to transfer into the regular force in progress. And I got the phone call a month prior saying, you've been accepted into the regular force. This event happens December 18th, 2001. I swore my allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II and became a member of the regular forces and MSCO. Who knew that 2 years later, I'd be in Afghanistan. So the initial rotation, Roto Zero. We call it a Roto Zero because we actually have no experience. We're going in blind, but it's the foundational building blocks. Our job is to establish our camp, our routine, and start working on the hearts and mind mindset. But Afghanistan's a landlocked country. Everything has to come in by air or by road, through some seaport or some airport on a surrounding country. A lot of our stuff came in through Turkey and was driven over by contracted trucks. A lot of our stuff was flown in. The picture on the top side of the screen is an old C-130H model, which carried 6 aircraft pallets. An aircraft pallet is a big chunk of square steel that can hold upwards of 7,000 kilograms worth of freight. My job was to bring all that freight from the airport to Camp Julian, which was only 18 kilometers away, but it took almost 3.5 hours to drive 18K through the city. We had no idea what we were doing. We were dressed in green in an arid climate, hoping for the best, expecting the worst, not knowing what's going on at all. There was such a buildup of freight and material coming into the country that the task force commander on the ground, who was a full colonel, actually phoned back to the Joint Operations Command in Ottawa and said, stop sending me ammunition, stop sending me fuel and water, I need effing mail. The troops have gone 3 months without mail. Well, the message was received. A week and a half later, we had 3 aircraft show up with mail. And let me tell you, when we rolled through the front gate and all people saw was mailbags, it was the happiest day that we actually had in Camp Julian. It's like, oh my God, we have mail. And as we're sitting there going, oh, that's got to be somebody's cookies. Can't open the mailbag, we're not posties. Well, we loved it. We were getting letters from home, cookies, fresh socks, fresh underwear, Christmas cards, like 3 months early, but it was all good, it didn't really matter. The postal technicians looked at us and they're like, we absolutely hate you guys right now. We're like, yeah, we know. It took us about 3.5 days to sort through all the mail, and then we had to start distributing across the area of operations, which really was a 20-kilometer bubble. But at the same time, we had to go up north to Bagram Airfield, controlled by the Americans, because we had a small contingent there. I had the opportunity to go home just before Thanksgiving in 2003. I was rolling through Algonquin Park because my parents picked me up to take me home, say hi to the family, my brother, my young niece at the time. When over the radio on Rock 95, there was a mine strike in Afghanistan. Killed 2 Canadian soldiers approximately 3 kilometers behind our main operating camp. The one name that truly stands out in that mine strike is Sergeant Robert Short. He was my backdoor neighbor. He lived 1 street behind me. He left behind his wife, 2 sons and a daughter, 2 of which had disabilities, and they were on their own. I knew Robert. My wife babysat my first wife. There's a trend coming. Babysat their children, and we got to know them very well. 3 weeks before he died, he was actually in the back of my truck because I was moving him and his company around the area of operations. And then for the next 2 weeks that I was home on leave, wasn't the most pleasant thing because when I came back, he wasn't there. But again, it's not all doom and gloom. Some beautiful sights in Afghanistan. There truly, truly is. The picture that you see with the small convoy rolling in front of it is actually the King's Palace. The bottom half is all, not in this photo, ended up getting boarded up. So that nobody with bad intentions could move into said King's Palace and launch attacks on the Canadian camp. We decided to do this after somebody with bad intentions put a 122mm rocket inside the camp and had it, inside the palace and directed it at Camp Julian. Crude firing system, a little bit of water, some sticks, battery, some metal connectors. When the water bled out, boom, rocket would fire. Unfortunately, they didn't plan it so well. We found the rocket, but we couldn't discern it. So we sat in our shelters for about 7.5 hours going, is it coming or what? Private Gallagher, where are you going? I'm going for a smoke. Why? Because I'm going to die, it's not going to be a board. Get back in here! Nah, it's okay, I'm fine. Had my cigarette, walked back into the shelter. Don't do that again. Fine, we'll smoke in here. Don't smoke in here! Well, what do you want? Do you want me to die happy or do you want me to die beside you? A little bit of dark humor goes a long, long way in the theater of operations. In a later picture from the second roto, you'll actually see the Queen's Palace, which is located on top of the hill. And there is a tunnel system that went completely underneath Camp Julian to connect the two palaces. We discovered this and had to board it up for obvious reasons. Mining has a tendency to blow things up very, very well. And co-located right beside us was the Afghan National Army Training Camp. And I can tell you, they know how to use slings, they can play cricket, and when they whip a snowball at you, it feels like a hardball. But of course, we have to protect ourselves. The picture, the small image where you see the back of a helmet, is one of the earlier patrols through the city of Kabul, going through one of the traffic circles. This is actually a passenger movement from the airport. Just before we went into Afghanistan, the German army out of Camp Warehouse, located approximately, hold on a second, it's been a long time. I agree. Roughly 15 kilometers away from the airport, the Germans were transporting 35 people in a bus. Well, they decided to take a yellow and white Toyota taxi cab full of explosives, drive up beside the bus, detonated it, and killed all 35 of them. And the Canadian government said, well, we got to do something about that. So the armored vehicles that you see in these images are only designed to stop 308. Do we have any hunters in the room? Okay. So 308 round, 7.62. It's a high-powered round, but it's not going to do a lot of damage. But that's all that armor plating is designed to do. So if they rolled up on us with double-stacked homemade explosives, it would be a bad day for the occupants. Because it's not necessarily the explosion, it's the pressure wave that kills you inside. Under the Taliban rule, you couldn't own a car unless it was a yellow and white taxi. In a city of 11 million people driving yellow and white taxi cabs. So we get a threat assessment, be on the lookout for a yellow and white Toyota Corolla. License plate, upside down heart, wagon wheel, backward 7, upside down heart. Well, in Pashtun and Dari, they read from the right to the left, so we were reading the license plates wrong to begin with. And we're looking at symbols that made no sense to us. So every yellow and white Toyota Corolla was, is that the one? I hope not. But again, this is the early rotation. We had no idea what was going on. Unfortunately, it was the December time frame, just before Christmas or just after Christmas, we decided to raid a Taliban compound about 4 clicks outside Camp Julian. It was a nighttime raid, super silent, kind of like the movies. We backed our trucks into the wall, the infantry went over the wall, took a whole bunch of prisoners, put them in the trucks, we brought them in. Military police do what military police do, gather information and everything else. About 2 weeks after that, the Taliban decided that they would retaliate. And it was a coordinated attack on all major camps across the north, where we were stationed, with one of the more famous ones, for lack of a better term, was directed at the Germans at Camp Warehouse. The German sentry in the tower noticed that there was 2 cars speeding towards the entry gate, and they were extremely low to the ground, kind of like how the kids drive today, nice and low, makes absolutely no sense, you can't drive in the winter. But that was a key indicator that they were full of explosives. There were 2 vehicle-borne explosive devices heading towards the German camp. Without hesitation, they leveled their MG3 machine guns on, very similar to the MG42 that you see from the Second World War. And the first car exploded, killing the occupant, and the vehicle behind it ignited shortly thereafter. Camp Suter, the British camp, had the same thing. They lost 2 people. We were kind of lucky at Camp Julian until the following week. Just outside Gulf 2, which is a pogo point on the map, Corporal Jamie Murphy from Petawawa was killed when a suicide bomber with 2 60mm mortar rounds strapped to his chest walked out into traffic and threw himself on the Iltis Jeep. He detonated himself. Jamie lost his life. Jamie's uncle worked with me in base transport at the time. The only reason why Jamie lost his life is because he did what anybody else would do when an explosion goes off. He died. A metal fragment, slightly smaller than my finger, pierced the base of his skull, entered his brain, and he died instantly. The 2 other gentlemen in the Jeep survived with severe burns and some shrapnel injuries. And they are wondering today why they're still alive and Jamie isn't. And really, it was kind of a design flaw in our helmets. To accommodate ponytails, braids, and buns for female soldiers, there's a small curve at the back of our helmet. That curve wasn't there, Jamie'd be alive today. That wasn't released in the media. His uncle told us that. His wife was devastated. They started holding a memorial tournament because Jamie loved baseball. And his death is immortalized in Julian Austin's The Red and White. If you ever have a chance to hear it on YouTube, it's a very moving and touching song. And Julian Austin absolutely adored us in Afghanistan. Enough doom and gloom for a minute. How are we doing?
Good.
Okay. The picture with me and my son is, this is a perfect segue into the next slide, is, well, the second deployment. He was about 3.5 weeks old. This is why I have my ex-wife. Because my first wife, we got married, and 4 weeks later I was on a plane. My son was born 3 weeks later in 2005, and here I am on my second deployment to Afghanistan, Rota 4/0. You may ask yourself, why is it a split number? Because it was the 4th rotation up north, but we were moving the camp south. Because at the time, Prime Minister Stephen Harper said, things are getting really hairy down south, we need to do something about it. The north is pretty much stabilized. As promised, there is the Queen's Palace. We normally had heavy security up there, for obvious reasons, because it overlooked our camp. The group photo is actually the transportation platoon. There's about 34 of us, 37, because not everybody was there for the group photo, supporting a battle group of 2,400 people. I was on the road every single day for 185 days on my second rotation. Well, moving a camp north to south. And I can tell you, over 132,000 kilometers and 112 convoys driving from Kabul to Kandahar, I actually started to appreciate the country for what it once was. Some of the most gorgeous sunrises and sunsets I've ever seen in my life. Coupled with the fact that at any moment somebody might detonate a bomb and kill me, well, you take the good with the bad, right? The group photo, I'm the tall, lanky one with the hands behind the back. And the gentleman just behind my right-hand shoulder is Master Corporal Jason Brown, who's currently posted in Petawawa. Everybody else in that photo has had enough. They've all recently retired in the last couple of years. But if we kind of go from the bunny years over, that is Craig Jesso, he got out in 2009. Kenny Blunden had a heart condition. They released him in 2015. Tim Canning just got out 2 years ago, and Luke Beauchamp has a really, really bad back from doing stupid army things, and he just recently retired. In this photo here, there's one gentleman, Sergeant Stewart. He did not die in Afghanistan, but because of what he witnessed and what he experienced, he's self-medicating, so he drank himself, stupid, quite a bit. And he was killed in a vehicle accident just outside CFP Gagetown after he rolled his car into a ditch of a night partying. So it's just not the physical actions of the war that weighed in on us. But this is one of the most famous pictures that you'll see of the embassy ops truck drivers in Afghanistan. The lead vehicle is a Bison APC. Again, not really designed to stop much, but it gave us something to work with. If you count back, there's a truck just coming around the corner. That's my truck. I'm like posted all over the defense news, and I'm like, I'm kind of cool. This convoy, this is only a snapshot of the convoy. This was a convoy of 232 plus vehicles rolling down Highway 1 from Kabul to Kandahar. We were stretched out pretty far, and the locals did not like the fact that we would not let them pass or anywhere in our convoy. But unlike the roads here in North America, it's smooth. I mean, you drive down to 27, we all know what it's like. Oh my God, where's my coffee? Oh yeah, it's in my lap, or it's over there. Smooth. Because of the money that NATO forces were investing in Afghanistan to build infrastructure. That road was freshly paved. Portions of it were freshly paved. Other portions had been excavated by homemade explosives. one of the forward operating bases that we would commonly stop at was Fob Gasney. Us Canadians were never truly on time. We kind of like to be late. And we decided to roll out a little bit late one morning. And as we rolled through, it was a nice, beautiful Sunday morning, I think. Go about 10 minutes up the road, and you heard the crack whoop of VDIEDs, homemade explosives, explosives in general going off. Because it does, it makes a distinctive crack whoop sound. It's not like in the movies. And as we came back the following day to go back up north and gather more supplies, there was a blast crater about half the size of this room, where they killed 8 American soldiers in 2 Humvees because they were waiting for us, but we were late. They got bored, they walked away, and then they hit the Americans instead. It's not the first time that's happened. I was used as bait for a few convoys as well, going, we're just going to send you out there on this mission. We were being used as bait so that they would engage us and that we could eliminate the threat. Unfortunately, on Road 04, as we were leaving Camp Julian the last time in December, it was 3:30 in the morning. Last convoy out there was about 50 trucks and armored vehicles. Came over the radio, all call signs, net call, net call. 909er TAC is advising that we have 1 times fatality vehicle rollover. Gentleman's name was Cam Laidlaw. He was 22 years old. He was driving a LAV, very similar to the armored vehicle up front. They swerved to avoid a kid in the road. The vehicle rolled over. He was ejected and crushed by 25 tons of armored vehicle. That is the last thing that the Canadians heard as we left Camp Julian. And we closed that chapter in the Afghanistan War. But one of the most unique things out there is the children. They're like cats, chickens. They come out of the woodwork. You'd be walking down the street, nothing. All of a sudden you turn around, there's a herd of kids. Canada, Canada, bonbon, candy, candy, cacao, cacao. No, go away. Cacao, mister, cacao. They want water. No water, go home. No home, cacao. Look, kid, what is it going to take? Cacao. How about bonbon? Okay, you give me a good deal. I'm not giving you money. Oops, dropped a bag of candy and a couple of bottles of water on the ground. The kids loved it. Throughout the whole entire operation, we were never supposed to give them food or water. Inadvertently, due to the horrible roads, things might have bounced off the truck 1 or 2 times, more than they should have. But again, you see this group of children follow a Canadian soldier on patrol because they were intrigued. Up north, they actually knew who they were. Canada, Canada, US, US, waving, smiling, happy. We rolled into Kandahar province, stern, horrible faces, looking at you, untrusting, sneering, giving you the middle finger, and a whole bunch of other rude gestures. Because they didn't know who we quite were as Canadians, but they remembered what the Americans, the Brits, and the Canadians did in 2001. They were not happy to see us, and it was not the warmest reception we've ever had. But they're kids. It takes 20 years to change the mindset of a generation. The 2 young ladies in the top corner are Canadian Forces medics who were working at various hospitals, who would take their time as part of CIVIC, so civilian military cooperation, go into schools, shelters, to provide medication and care for children. I cannot fathom the emotional distress that they went through on a daily basis, seeing that type of carnage in young children. Young boy at the bottom of the screen with the walker, one of those legs is prosthetic, stepped on a landmine. Afghanistan is one of the most mined countries in the world outside Cambodia. Rule of thumb was if it went off the road, you might as well leave it. I always had an oops, to put it politely. I was climbing out of my truck. Something about the size of a tuna can caught my eye with a ring of rocks around it. I'm like, well, shit. I think that's a mine. And it was. Reached into my pocket, put my foot back into the truck. Call the engineers, please. Why? Because I'm not going anywhere from this spot. You're done. Get into the truck. I'm like, I'm not moving. I know this foot is safe. I haven't gone click boom yet. Call the engineers. My friend Whitey rose up. Hey Ryan, what's going on? Big shit-eating grin on his face, smoking cigarettes. Yeah, that's a toe popper. You gonna do something about it? Yeah. Picks it up. It's inactive. I'm like, yeah, well, my Huggies are not inactive. Thanks. He goes, truck drivers are a bunch of babies. I'm like, so a toe popper is an anti-personnel mine, and it's designed to actually blow your foot off. It's not designed to kill you, it's just designed to maim you. Well, somebody was looking down on me that day because I saw a little tuna can. I'm like, oh, this is why I smoke. You shouldn't, it's bad for your health. Oh my God, so is diesel fuel and everything else in my occupation, I think. But again, the children, ages 8 or younger, were racing children 3 to 2 years old because their parents were killed, their parents were put into slavery, or their parents were working. There was children racing children throughout that country. Ken Blunden, on this rotation, we were driving up north. It was a bit of a dusty day. Big cloud of smoke, sees a silhouette off to his right-hand side. Silhouette doing this, holding up a rifle. At the last second before Ken pulled the trigger, he saw the orange cap of a toy gun. And he put that rifle down because the kid was 6 years old, same age as his daughter. And he looked at me white as a ghost and said, Ryan, I gotta go home. I'm like, Kenny, he's like, no, I almost killed a kid. Kenny was combat ineffective for the rest of the day because he could not live with himself and the fact that he was milliseconds away from pulling the trigger on a kid. To this day, Kenny still talks about it. Like, dude, I almost killed that kid. I'm like, Ken, he did a lot of things that we probably should never talk about again. But that's where some of our problems come to, because we hold all those feelings in. This presentation was originally geared for school-age children, so I like to show a comparison to how they went to school and how the children in Afghanistan go to school. This is before the fall of Afghanistan in 2021. As you can see, there's no windows, there's no doors, there's no roof, there's no chairs or desks in one of the schools. That's in one of the outlying provinces outside one of the major city centers. And then the girls' school, they're indoors. Of course, they're segregated. They're not allowed to be in the same class. And now with Taliban control back again, young school-age women and girls are not entitled to go to school or hold high-profile government jobs. And after almost 20-odd years of doing this, the country is not very happy with the Taliban rule, but we are not there to influence, and when they are ready to push back, I believe that they will. But the fall of Afghanistan was very, very traumatizing for many, many people who've served in Afghanistan because they felt that it was for nothing. I'm of a very difference of opinion. We all are makers of our own fate. Which leads me into Operation Medusa. I actually was not a part of this mission, but Op Medusa occurred in 2006 as part of Task Force 0107. So we went away from rotations to a task force. Sounds more aggressive, drove recruiting numbers up, and it actually worked. But it was one of the largest trench warfare battles since the First World War, with the whole entire sole purpose of driving the Taliban and Al-Qaeda out of the Panjwai district. One of the most famous sites was the White School. But why is Op Medusa important to me? Because I wasn't there. I was back in Petawawa, getting ready to be posted to CFP board the following year. Private Ainsworth Dyer, the former Olympian, was killed during Operation Medusa, when yet another ill-fated United States airstrike misidentified its target and fired its Gatling gun at a platoon of Canadians. What actually happened was the target was indicated in gray smoke, the garbage pile that was burning was black smoke, the pilot misidentified, and he used a Gatling gun designed to blow up tanks and fired it on a group of infantry in the open. Numerous casualties out of the platoon. A friend of mine, Kim Kuzno, survived. Around about that big, ricocheted off the ground, splintered, went through his boot and took his big toe off. He's like, Brian, I have no big toe. I'm like, oh, bullshit. Pulls his boot off, I'm like, you actually have no big toe. We were drinking that night, and he goes, I got something to show you. Reaches into the closet, blows some dust off it. There's the boot that he was wearing, bronzed, like we would with a baby shoe. He goes, I'm keeping that. I don't think my toe's in it, but I'm going to keep it. I'm like, Kim, that's really, really more. He's like, you think that's bad? One of the young privates in his section, a rock ricocheted off the ground, pierced his helmet, went around 360 degrees, came out the other side. If it was a half an inch lower, it would have killed him. That kid still has that helmet, and I don't blame him. Pretty sure the kid's bought quite a few lottery tickets in his life too, but I think most of his luck's been used up. Because our helmets are not designed for direct impact. Helmets are designed for ricochet. And our current helmets will only stop a certain caliber size round at point blank. Not designed to stop an aircraft round to blow up tanks. So as these members were being repatriated medically from the theater of operations after being stabilized in Germany, they flew into the Canadian Reception Center in Ottawa. I was posted in Petawawa as the commanding officer's driver. We had a truck driver who did something really stupid. He ran over his own leg with a Jeep and broke his leg. You only need a grade 10 education to be a truck driver in the military. This all adds up now. So he was coming home on that repatriation flight as well. So we're there, Ottawa, drinking coffee, talking with the boss, kind of dressed the way I am now, when the family started coming in. And as their sons, husbands, were being offloaded off the plane, one of the mothers looked at me and said, why the hell couldn't it have been you? And I looked at her dumbfounded and I said, I don't know. And she broke down and cried. And all I can say is, I understand, it's not your fault. She goes, I should never have said that to you. I'm like, it's okay. You have a right to be upset. Yes, but I should never have said it to you. It's the emotional burden that the families bear that we seldom talk about. And that was a rude awakening for me in my young military career. Because it was all about, yeah, we can do this, we're hard, we're tough as Christmas candy, fruitcake, however you want to phrase it. No, there's more to being a soldier than just being a soldier, and it's respecting and supporting the families as well. Not bad for being 24 years old. So my third mission, speaking of things that you can say you never get back in the world, Task Force 210, also known as Charlie 23. I deployed to the Canadian Special Operations Regiment as one of their logistics specialists. The gentleman you see on the screen is Master Corporal Francis Wall. He's a traffic technician. Think of the people at Pearson Airport, handle your bags, make sure the flights are on time, all that fun stuff. Multi-hatted person because of the size of their occupation. Shipping, movement, and freight, kind of like Amazon Plus. So my last interaction with Francis was in March 2011, 5 days before the Fukushima nuclear plant disaster because of the tsunami. We were tired, we were cranky, we were going home. Francis was in Germany, offloading a military plane to put it on a civilian plane. The German Airport Authority was not cooperating with him. Francis was stressed, he didn't have a lot of help. And I looked at Francis and I said, oh my fucking God, can you not do one fucking thing right? That June, as I turned on CTV, Canadian Forces soldier from Kansovcom has died, non-combat related. I'm like, what the hell is that? We're a small regiment. We know who's deployed and who's not, so your mind starts going. And then they showed Francis's picture. I live the guilt and shame of what I said to him every day of my life because I cannot take it back. As part of the team moving his family off the base, explaining to his wife and kids, my dad's not home. Sorry, you have to leave the base. This is why. His father came up to me and said, it's okay, he forgives you. And I looked right at his father and said, you're not the man to apologize to me. I am not worthy of it. My son knows you can lead it. And when I speak to the school kids, I'm like, this is why it's important to watch what you say, to know your audience, and be mindful that words can hurt and cut deep. And all of a sudden I get a round of applause from the teacher. I'm like, because it might be your best friend, and it's the last time you're ever going to talk to him. That is actually his funeral, his ramp ceremony in Kandahar Airfield. The gentleman leading it is Wes. God, I forget his last name. But he's an ammunition technician. He sent me an email and he's like, Ryan, it's not your fault, man. I'm like, I know it's not my fault. I have no guilt over his death. I have the guilt over the facts of what I said. But he did take his own life. He committed suicide because he was having problems at home. He was suffering a little bit from mental health. And he just didn't have the opportunity to talk about it. Okay, I promise that's kind of where the bad stuff ends for now. Like I said, this is a roller coaster. It's fun. It's exciting. So, after a horrible divorce and separation through multiple tours in Afghanistan, what did it cost me? My first wife and my son. I watched my son grow up in pictures. I'm not going to lie. Family was kind of second priority. So I progressed through my life, I matured, I thought things were a little bit better. And they certainly were. So I got married, December 2nd, 2022. After 8 years. Wonderful woman. Absolutely wonderful. Hey, we need you to go to Egypt. Yeah, that's great, but not before this date. And the occupation manager goes, you don't get to make that decision. The Canadian Army is telling you to go. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm getting married to go pound salt. Oh, we didn't know that. I'm like, you never asked. So the first time in my military career, I told the Army no, and they listened. So I was allowed to get married. Here's the trend. 4 weeks later, I was on a plane to Egypt. The Sinai Peninsula. Where the hell is the Sinai Peninsula? Well, there it is on a map. It's wedged in between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, Gaza Strip, and Israel. Roughly 9,932 kilometers away from Toronto, as denoted by our multi-directional sign. Taken right beside the Red Sea. So, this is a very rare opportunity for members of my occupation to get this deployment because we only have 2 positions on it. One is rotated every 6 months, the other one is for a year. So what is it? Operation Calumet, also known as Task Force Algora, is our contribution to the multinational force and observers mission between the treaty partners of Egypt and Israel, which was established in 1979 by the Carter administration. Canada first joined the MFO in 1985. I was 3. The MFO has been established since 1982 and is the most successful peacekeeping operation in the world. And it's not UN-led. This is not a United Nations mission. This is a multinational force run by the Americans. And why does it work? Because the treaty partners of Egypt and Israel talk to each other on a regular basis. Hey, you guys violated this aspect of the treaty. Well, you did this. And then there's the middle negotiator going, okay, so how do we resolve this? And they talk. They have bilateral meetings on a regular basis. They have dinners together. And if we think back to 1967, the war of the 50s, the early 60s, this was not a regular occurrence. One of the gentlemen that worked for us, he was a contractor, Colonel Mustafa, was his former Army rank, was a pilot in the war in 67, got shot down. The Egyptians were told that the Israelis will murder you, rape you, do horrible things to you, and you'll never see your family again. So when he got shot down, he was petrified, because the Israelis picked him up. The Israelis gave him medical care. They fed him. They allowed him to write letters home, saying I was okay. They made arrangements to get him transported across the border. And he said, it's not the soldiers who misinterpreted. It's not the soldiers who tell the lies. It's the politicians. And he's talking to a group of soldiers. He goes, I want you all to remember that. We are all the same. Be it Jesus, Allah, we are all the same. We are soldiers. We have a code. I'm like, that's very profound. And this gentleman's only about that tall. And I had to bug him. I'm like, that's not because you rejected, is it? He goes, shut up. Funny man. Very passionate, but he was a little short man. So what you see actually is a dilapidated, rundown building. It's called the Beaver Lodge. From 1985 all the way up to 2015, this is where the Canadians lived. And there's a few other buildings like that where we worked out of. In 2015, ISIS, affiliated group related to Sinai, said, nah, we're gonna push people out of the northern Sinai Peninsula. So they were firing rockets, mines, IEDs, very similar to Iraq and Afghanistan, to establish a forced presence. Because of the threat, the majority of the MFO actually moved from the south, moved from the north, about an hour from the Rafah border, down to the South Sinai Peninsula, outside Sharm el-Sheikh. So when I was doing a lot of work up north as a safety officer and company sergeant major, I got to see our old dilapidated shack. Took a picture of it, sent it to a few friends who were on that mission before. They're like, I remember working in there. Still looks the same. I'm like, well, that tells me you guys did do a lot of housekeeping. I did not have the opportunity to see the pyramids other than flying over Cairo. However, there's lots of mini pyramids around North Camp. So I'm like, well, I saw the pyramids. Yay, yay. So again, I deployed from January 4th to the 23rd of July. I was a Canadian Contingent Sergeant Major, odd number, 52, I have 53 at home right now. And I was also the Force Safety Officer Assistant. There is a total of 15 troop contributing nations on the ground now in the Sinai Peninsula. There is upwards of 20 fund contributing nations that support this peace operation. However, during my tenure there, we had 5 fatalities across the whole entire force. No Canadians, thankfully. 2 of them were Egyptian care service workers who suffered heart attacks because their health was extremely poor to begin with. They smoke more than I do. They don't eat right. Their average life expectancy is much lower than ours. And also the climatic conditions play a factor into it. We lost 1 Fijian to cardiac arrest during his physical fitness test. Again, climatic conditions. It was 37 degrees Celsius at 4 o'clock in the morning when they were doing their PT test. The Fijians don't drink alcohol. They're not allowed to. It's forbidden when they're deployed. So they consume kava. It's kind of a narcotic plant native to their island. Kind of gives you a numbing effect. In higher doses, kind of gives you hallucinations, but it also weakens the heart muscles. One of our gentlemen, he was the advisor on treaty party relations. He died 5 days before we left. Had 2 heart attacks back to back. He was perfectly fine, playing cards, socializing with some people. Went back to his room and was like, I don't feel so good. He called 911. People came running. He wasn't around much longer. His ramp ceremony occurred 3 days before we did our medals presentation and left the country. And unfortunately, the picture where you see me standing on the side of the road, doing all the improper things, going, yep, my foot's on a rock, I look super cool. There is no mines, we checked. Was a Colombian who died on April 1st. I was at the gym, working out, doing cool army stuff, getting buff, going, yep, gonna go home, see my wife eventually. Gotta look good, gotta stay fit. Ryan, we need you to go up north. I'm like, when? Now? Gonna tell me why? No. Get your shit, get on the plane. Okay. Here, tell me why? Need you to investigate a vehicle accident. Okay. So part of my job as an MSC officer, I'm actually a level 2-3 collision reconstructionist. Similar to the OPP. I'll tell you what happened. Might take me a while, but I'll tell you how the vehicle accident occurred. So what actually happened in this incident was this gentleman from Colombia was driving an 18,000-pound armored vehicle from one of our remote sites back to North Camp. He was in oncoming traffic, left-hand side of the road. He was adjusting his seat, pulled the seat forward, realized he was on the wrong side of the road, cranked the steering wheel to the right, left the road at 102 kilometers an hour. The vehicle vaulted, so it went through the air about 35 meters, impacted the ground, right front passenger side, rolled 3 times. He was not wearing his seatbelt. An object in motion stays in motion. The combat lock on the door failed. The door flung open. As the vehicle came to a rest, he fell out and 18,000 pounds of steel landed on his chest. The 2 other occupants in the vehicle were severely battered, unable to move, but somehow they got themselves out of the vehicle. No broken limbs, just shock and heavy bruising. They started to perform CPR after excavating a small trench underneath Sergeant Medina Bonina, when they realized it was time to quit. Because as they were doing chest compressions, it felt like jello. He lost his life because he wasn't wearing an effing seatbelt. And in the month of February, as a force safety officer and a transportation specialist, we did a vehicle safety blitz going, people aren't wearing seatbelts, nobody has a driver's license, brakes aren't being checked, lights aren't working. Just the simple stuff that we see back here at home. And then we told the Major General who runs this force, somebody is going to die, sir, if you don't get a grip on this. He listened. He told us we can do what we need to mitigate vehicle safety issues. He left. His tour of duty was done. A new general came in. 3.5 weeks later, this gentleman lost his life. The picture on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Yes, left-hand side of the screen is from the vehicle accident. That is 20 meters down into a ditch. We did a criminal investigation, and we did a traffic reconstruction investigation, because we always have to rule out a criminality aspect. But to get down there, not knowing that it's mined or not, we had to take bayonets and prod our way through rock, coral, and sand to go, yeah, okay, it's safe. Eventually we got fed up, we lit a cigarette, said if it happens, it happens. And then into the vehicle we went. When the recovery team showed up, they rolled it over, and it's very hard to see, but that dark spot is oil, engine oil from the cab of the truck, because the door actually swung 180 degrees off its hinge. It's not what you think it is. It's just engine oil. It's very, very hard to see, but I'm going to stand in front of the screen. Bad presentation rules. That's the right front tire. Here, it first impacted over here. So the car actually hit and rotated like this in the air 3 times. We managed to fish it out and recover it, and the hardest part I had to do was interview the other 2 occupants in the vehicle who just lost their good friend. What did you see? What do you remember? What do you recall? And it was revealed that possibly the sergeant had contemplated taking his own life at some point. He was using phrases such as, this might be my last mission, let's stop here and get a group photo, I don't know if I'll ever see you guys again, but let's just get close. Because he wasn't due to leave the country until July. I am not privy to how that portion of the investigation turned out. I personally believe it's a combination that he was not in a good state of mind when he was driving. But again, not all doom and gloom. I actually got to see a mangrove outside of Florida, which is really, really cool. So the crystal clear waters that you see is from Ras Mohammed National Park, which is just to, let me think of geographical location here, west of where our camp is in the Sinai. It's about a 30-minute drive, surrounded by coral, shelves that are 20, 40, 60 feet tall. And this is an inlet from the Red Sea into inlet channels. I've never seen water that clear. There's also a bunch of salt lakes there. Of course, military fitness is key. This is during one of our competitions. Surprisingly, that's 4:30 in the morning. That's how light it was in February. And I promised them I would not show the picture of them all hot and sweaty, absolutely devastated on the ground. It was a 7.5-hour fitness competition made up of teams of 10. Testing military skills, military fitness, carrying heavy objects over great distances, pushing cars for no reason.
How'd you do?
We came in 4th. The Australians totally dominated, and then the Kiwis came in 2nd, Fijians came in 3rd, we came in 4th. Which was an improvement out of 6 teams, because normally Canada finished it dead last. And the one with the beautiful, beautiful sunset was taken 3 days before we left. We were out on the Red Sea enjoying the dinner cruise, surrounded by about 55 dolphins at that point. I did not get a good picture of the dolphins, or I would have shared it with everyone. Very calming, very peaceful, very serene. Cradle of civilization and religion, if you actually think about it. I mean, Mount Sinai was a 3.5-hour drive away from us. Very, very interesting from a historical context. And of course, we could have done duty tours there. I did not have the opportunity. I was always investigating something safety related, i.e. I cut my finger with a knife. That's going to be 5 days worth of paperwork, thank you. Remember, safety is a hindrance, but it is required. So something near and dear to my heart. I have a diagnosed mental health condition. It's a long, complicated title. Other specified trauma stressor related disorder. It's not quite post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not quite an operational stress injury. But it's close enough to say something ain't right in your head all the time. I went through 18 months of recovery, and I ignored it for close to 7.5 years before I sought treatment. I decided to seek treatment when I thought I had a heart attack. I had a massive panic attack at 11:30 at night, September 18th, or pardon me, September 15th, 2018. Ooh, that don't feel good. Ooh, that's numb. Ooh, I'm sweaty. Oh shit, I'm dying. What do? No, I didn't have a cigarette before he answers that question for me. I wake up, the guy beside me, dude, I think I'm having a heart attack. Calm down, we're okay. So we go to the guard shacks, we call 911. And they're like, we don't have that address in our 911 system. That's when panic really started setting in, going, I'm going to die in this shitty little shack surrounded by people who don't know what they're doing. Get me out of here. So they loaded me up in the ambulance. They had me all hooked up and everything else. And they're like, okay, we're going to take you to the hospital. Your heart rate's a little high. It's only 135. I'm like, it's normally 65 at resting, not a bad day. Paramedic leans forward and goes, step on it. Well, doesn't my heart rate go from 135 to 165? Oh yeah, get me out of here. And I'm going to Pembroke. Anybody been to Pembroke? It's not the best place in the Ottawa Valley. Like, I'd rather have gone to Deep River. But I didn't have much of a choice. So I was admitted overnight, hooked up to the 19 lead, the big fancy one, testing for everything. They did the blood work, no signs of the protein. And they said, you can be your mental health. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, I had a heart attack. Don't give you any discharge papers to do that. So they send me in, ultrasound, all this other stuff. Yeah, no, it turns out that I was actually burnt out. High functioning anxiety. So I functioned better in high stress environments than low. And it's because I ignored a lot of shit in my life. I didn't talk about it. It's connected to my father's passing, who, when I returned in March 2011, he died September 12th, 2011. I was gone for, well, at that time, shit, that was 2011. Who's good with math? Not me. I've been gone away from home for about 15 years at that point. Didn't really go home quite often. Focused on my job. Regretted a lot of things. So my father's death and multiple deployments and everything else weighed on my shoulders. I'm not alone. Right now I'm dealing with several individuals at work from the Afghanistan conflict or various other military experiences who are also suffering mental health crisis. The stigma before was, suck it up, buttercup, put your head down, soldier on, no pain, no gain, all that effing BS. Since Afghanistan, the military has made great improvements in its mental health care. And I will always champion it because I have lost too many friends who have taken their own lives because the hardest step is admitting that you have a problem. I self-medicated for years. I drank, I smoked, I did stupid things. Let's try fast. Did all the things that we probably looked at each other and said, yeah, we probably shouldn't do that again. I did it. But now I'm able to communicate with my subordinates, my peers, going, dude, you might want to go talk to someone. Might not be anything wrong at all. Go talk to someone because they don't care who you are from that perspective. They just want to hear you out. Unfortunately, my spouse that I married 4 weeks before I left also has other specified trauma stressor related disorder, severe depression, and anxiety. Right now we're currently separated. My mental health and her mental health clashed when we got back. I've been with this woman for 8 years. Part of me died when she left. She's in New Brunswick right now with her family. The best part of me got up and died and walked out of my life because I was having some issues and I couldn't communicate them effectively, and she was having issues because her husband, her rock, her provider, who's looked after her mental health for 7.5 years, got up and left for 7.5 months. It's not just the soldiers who suffer, it is the families. My mother threatened to push me downstairs and break both my legs if I deployed back to Afghanistan. Well, Mom, it's been 12 and a half years. The Army wants me to go to Egypt. No. Okay then, I'm going. No, you're not. My brother said, I will kill you myself. You're not going back. My mother and my spouse clashed while I was gone. A lot of resentment, a lot of hatred. Mothers, daughter-in-laws, sons, father-in-laws, family dynamics at work. After having a beautiful relationship for 7 years. My mother's gone through 4 operational deployments. My spouse lost her father 5 days after my father died, same year, same week. So there's a lot of emotional shit to unpack, pardon the expression. And just before I left, 5 days after we got married, her guardian, her father, had a heart attack. And I left 4 weeks later. So there's a lot of strain on us every time we deploy. It's easy for me, I know what I'm doing, 24/7. Try not to die, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna do my job, and I'm gonna come home. I'm not worried about the bills. I'm not worried about home repairs, shoveling snow, cutting the grass, looking after the cats and dogs. So it was rough. Military has cost me a lot. My success has cost me my family. Twice. I'm very hopeful that we can reconcile. Right now, after some of the colorful language in the driveway, it might be a little dicey for a bit. But I love it. But we don't think about the families. We hear about the Silver Cross mothers quite often. There's one named at every cenotaph, a major event in Canada. But there's also the Memorial Cross that is issued to our families if something happens. We can name 3 beneficiaries to it. If something happens to me, my mother will be a Silver Cross mother. My son will be a Memorial Cross recipient. So will my brother and my spouse. And we show them on TV, but we don't tell their side of the story. We don't tell what is going on with them. Let's think about the First World War. How many animals did we lose who were serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces or the British Empire? There's a lot of unseen casualties in war. And it's too easy to thank a soldier, and I appreciate it every time it happens. The families get neglected, and it's unfortunate that we do. Petawawa started a campaign 2nd or 3rd year we were in Afghanistan. It was called the Invisible Ribbon Campaign, to represent the families that were left behind. We still use the Yellow Ribbon Campaign. I know the song, I don't remember all the lyrics. But we started the Invisible Ribbon Campaign to honor the families and recognize them. And the photo in the center is probably one of the most moving ones to me. Hopefully we all understand that this is the Highway Heroes, the Highway 401, from Trenton to Toronto. Every Canadian soldier who has died in combat in modern operations, or peacekeeping operations, or peace support operations, has been transported up this highway to have an autopsy performed by the coroner to determine the cause of death. At the height of Afghanistan, I have never seen such a level of national pride in most of my military career. I joined at the end of what they call the Decade of Darkness. Some people believe we're heading back there. But as a nation, random strangers stopping, pulling over on the side of the road to pay their compliments and respects to my fallen brothers and sisters in arms is absolutely emotionally overwhelming. I think, personally, a little bit of this needs to come back. Not the loss of life, but that unity. And when I see it for the OPP, our first responders, it is the exact same emotion. And these are the people who suffer in silence because they don't get the attention that the soldiers do. All right, doom and gloom's over, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God, that was emotional. So it's not all bad, I can tell you that. Yes, we lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of friends in Petawawa. We lost 186 lives in Afghanistan. The Canadian diplomat who was blown up by a BBIED in January 2006. I was standing underneath the Chinook helicopter when the Jeep was offloaded into Kandahar Airfield. If you go to the Canadian War Museum, you'll see a Mercedes G-Wagon with its front end blown off. I unloaded that. So my buddy. But we also did really, really odd and strange things. we have a thing back in Petawawa, it's called the Trucker's Toy Drive. We raise fund, collect toys for local area charities. While we were in Afghanistan, what did we decide to do? We're going to build a 48-foot water slide and put into a 10,000-liter water bladder. $5 a slide, 10 for 2. Oh, what a deal, right? Just double the price. People are having the time of their lives. It was our birthday too, unit birthday. So have a beer because you're allowed to. Have a piece of cake. Get on the water slide. Whee! Splash. Everybody's looking at us like, you guys have a water slide? Yeah, you're American. $10 for one. Okay. We set up a mini golf course. You have to do things to make it feel like home. So it wasn't always bad. Rick Mercer was over there quite a few times, Rick Mercer report days. They did show tours for us, CanCon show tours. And I remember Rick Mercer running around Kandahar Airfield with his cameraman. Rick Mercer? Hi, I'm Rick Mercer. Jesus! Short little Newfoundlander, right? No. But yeah, he'd run in and out of the tents with his cameraman, kind of catch you off guard. But ladies and gentlemen, from the bottom of my heart, one, thank you very much for allowing me to have this opportunity to share my experience, and for your support to the Canadian Armed Forces and what you do from a historical society context. History is extremely important to me. It's one of my favorite subjects, and it's how we maintain our identity, customs, traditions, and values. So thank you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, and we saw the picture of the children. Where do they come from? Like dirt roads, everything's been sort of chaotic. Where do they come out of? How do they come to meet up with you folks?
It's a very interesting question. Pick a crevice, pick a rock, pick a piece of garbage, they come out of it. I've seen kids lift up tarps. Remember, like, that's just a garbage pile. No, it's their house. Underneath the tree. Lift it up. Hello, Canada. Hey, man, what's going on? Or you'd think it's a bombed out building or something like that, and there's sheets of corrugated steel over top of it just to block the wind and everything else. That was their home. Or they'd honestly be wandering the fields. Nomads. Just kids showing up out of nowhere. We actually never knew where the majority of them came from, to be honest. It's like herding cats. Where did you come from? But out in the desert, away from the major city centers, yeah, they're just roaming freely. They stay where they can near the populated buildings. But the kids you'd see randomly out everywhere. It was just weird. Yes?
Another question. Can you share with us the medals you have and what those represent?
Absolutely. Lots of abbreviations. Bunch of big military words. So we'll start from the outside in because the Canadians medal chart, we have an order of precedence. So the first one is the Southwest Asia Service Medal with Afghan bar issued for Op Enduring Freedom and Op Archer, 2005 to 2006. On the back of it, it's actually a Hydra, but all Canadian medals, the Queen's portrait, or now the King's portrait, will always be displayed. On my set of ribbons, I have a shield with 3 maple leafs on it, which denotes an operational combat tour in the presence of an armed enemy. The one beside it is the General Campaign Star Southwest Asia Service Medal with first rotation bar. This is the first rotation, campaign medal that has been issued since the Korean War. We now have 3 other variants of it, and Afghanistan was actually classified as a campaign due to its duration. Each gold bar represents an additional 180 days in theater. Where I did a split rotation between Enduring Freedom and Op Athena, I'm short 1 bar, so I have the Afghanistan bar on the other one. The one centered is the Canadian Peacekeeping Service Medal, issued for 30 days minimum in support of a peace support operation, issued for my participation in the Sinai. The fancy orange, green, and white one is the Multinational Force of Observers Medal for 190 days? Or 180 days, can't remember. Between 180 and 190 days in support of the MFO mission. For a full year, you get a numeral for 2 consecutive periods of 180 days. Now the one on the end is the Canadian decoration known commonly in the military circle as I didn't get caught medal. It represents good service to the government of Canada. And the first bar denotes an additional 10 years. So it's, I stayed out of jail for 12, and then another 10 years for a total of 22 years of good behavior. Also known as the lucky loony, sarcastically. The next step up from this is 32 years of service, 42 years of service, 52 years of service. I can actually retire at age 60. I joined at 16 and a half, and it works out to about 48 years of service, if I want to go that far. My knees are shot, my back hurts, my neck hurts, I'm tired, I want to go home. We all feel the same way, right?
Yeah.
So that is the medals. If we move over, the badge with the red stripe and the Royal Lion is just my command badge. So the military works on a hierarchical parental structure. Every command has a sub-command. I work for what is called the Chief of Military Personnel. There's a whole bunch of organizations under it. They fall under the Vice Chief of Defense Staff Office. But I also work for the Military Personnel Training Group. I call them the alphabet group because it's just like MPGTG, MPGGG, CDA, CFSTG. The list just goes on and on. I call it, we're the alphabet group, but we're part of Military Training Group. I have over 100,000 kilometers of safe driving. It's the wrong badge. It's actually closer to 255,000. And when you think about it, we don't drive a lot in the military. But when you're driving in a theater of operations, going through the C&E, and you haven't hit anything, it's quite an impressive record. My name tag, obviously. Rank insignia. So this just denotes Master Warrant Officer. I'm not in the Navy. I'm not a Chief Petty Officer. Second class. I am a Master Warrant Officer. The next step up for myself, let's hope for another one more year of good conduct, is I'm actually in the promotion window to become a Chief Warrant Officer next year. And from there, I would probably most likely be moving to Gagetown, which would be a great benefit if I can talk to my wife, as a Regimental Sergeant Major of one of 3 units that I'm being competed for. I belong to the Logistics Branch. We are now called the Royal Canadian Logistics Service. We had an opportunity to go back to the Corps, but because we are a mixed occupation in the logistics field, because we have Army, Navy, and Air Force, and the logistics branch, going to Corps might upset the Air Force and the Navy folks. I'm sorry, I'm an Army guy, calling me a Corps would make sense. Because then we go back to pre-unification in '68 to the Royal Canadian Army Service Corps, where my father served. And Corps is also got a little bit more respect in the service. So that's kind of the uniform in a nutshell. Of course, the military is like, oh, you belong to the logistics branch, buy more guns. Yes, sir.
I want to ask a question which is maybe very unfair of me, but Canada used to be a major participant with the United Nations, with some incredibly wonderful things that Canada has done. I suppose you wouldn't have any idea why Canada is not active with the United Nations forces, which are deployed all around the world.
So interestingly enough, sir, we are still participating largely on the United Nations scale. It's not the large troop contributing forces that we've seen historically in the past, like with Bosnia or the Golan Heights. Right now we have over 65 missions across the globe. The majority of them are 1 of 1 or 2 of 2 positions in supporting United Nations operations. One of our small enduring missions is 1 female in the Congo right now. So we are still supporting the UN. It's just from a strategic standpoint, mission mindset is shifting more towards Eastern Europe right now, and Indo-Pacific. And with the size of our force being so small, we have to spread out the wealth as far as we can go. But we are still supporting the UN on a regular basis, just not from a historical standpoint. Yes, ma'am.
Did you come across many women who were serving with you?
Yes. So, don't have the exact date. So, in my occupation, I believe it was 1983 or 85 that the first female truck driver was employed in the Canadian Armed Forces. In the Sinai Peninsula, My task force commander, Lieutenant Colonel, or pardon me, Colonel Chantal Tethero. She's a combat engineer. She was the first CO of an engineering regiment, combat engineer regiment. She was the chief of liaison in the Sinai Peninsula. And her greatest achievement, and she loves this, she goes, I got 2 female washrooms put in to liaison with international organizations. Because, again, the Egyptians, no, you don't need that. She's like, oh, yes, we do. Or I'm not going to work with you. And also the MFO celebrated its first International Women's Day this year. Under the guidance of Chantal, Vivi, she was one of our Norwegian majors. This woman climbed Everest 4 times, and after the earthquake in Nepal, decided to take 8 months of leave and assist in rebuilding Nepal and schools and providing first aid to a lot of people. So I've come across women, men, however people wish to identify, throughout my career. And really, they're no different. We're all human beings at the end of the day. Any other questions?
Yes, how's the food?
Depends on where I am. I'm not going to lie, I've had some horrible food in Canada, and I have had some great food around the world. Ration packs, no longer the compo tins, and you got to open them up. Everything's an aluminum bag they can heat with hand warmers, essentially. We've come a long way. Don't drink the water from the ration packs, gives you aluminum pot syndrome. It's not good. But now we have things like poutine, lobster. Yes, we can get lobster in an aluminum bag. Absolutely amazing. One of the worst ones out there, it's affectionately nicknamed lung in a bag. It's a ham omelet and salsa. And, well, we all know what happens to eggs, right? They turn gray eventually. Yeah, it looks like a lung in a bag. So it's like, nope, not eating that one. And Salisbury steak was absolutely horrible because it smelled like cat food. Anything that comes out of an aluminum bag, though, when you're hungry enough, you'll eat it. So one ration pack typically has about 1,400 calories if you eat everything inside it. And I've eaten like 5 of those in a day. I've been that hungry. The food in Egypt was absolutely amazing because it's the Americans. They like their food. Thursday was the best day. They gave us fresh pasta, freshly made donuts. Oh yeah, better than Tim Hortons. None of this microwave stuff. And homemade ground beef burgers with bacon on Thursday nights. Because we followed the Egyptian Islamic calendar over there, we worked Sunday to Thursday. Friday and Saturdays were off. We call it low tempo. Afghanistan, I ate some very interesting food. Because, well, it was the kitchen. Our friends from Nepal were manning the kitchen, didn't really understand North American food prep standards. That bacon's not cooked. Yes, sir, it is. I don't think so. It just moved at me. Because it was not pork, it was beef bacon. And I've eaten some horrible food here in Canada. But again, being a truck driver over the road, I've eaten a lot of good food too. I walked into one place in West Virginia, exit 113, I believe, or exit 13. Anyways, the place is called Piggy's. Parked at the Flying J truck stop and walked a half mile up the road. Here's this abandoned shack. Lights on. What's going on? Opened up the door. Big cloud of cigar smoke hits you. You expect Patrick Swayze to come off the bar and roundhouse. Right? This type of bar. Old bingo chairs, flickering TV. What do you want? Air filter. And a Bud Light. We don't have Bud Light. All right. Bud? Yeah, we got Bud. Here you go. And a food menu. Okay. And it comes out, buddy's wearing, typical greasy, slobby shirt, white beater, all the yours are like, oh, this is going to be horrible. Hot, fresh, amazing hamburger, beautiful cut fries, and Patrick Swayze didn't kick me in the face. So, it really, when it comes to food, I'm a food motivated person. I like to eat. I like the food. If it's garbage, I will tell the cook so. But I don't upset the cooks or the people who pay me. But people also have to remember, don't upset the truck drivers because your bags might not end up where you want them. Any other questions?
would you, in today's environment, with military as it's happening and other wars across the world, suggest to a young person to go into the military?
Avoiding political connotation, absolutely. This is one of the best employment opportunities anybody can have. Right now, we are currently about 10,000 people short. 10,000 people short. So, medical and dental is provided for me. I pay roughly $1.98 a month for medical and dental coverage. And that is if I require to use a civilian hospital inside. That gives me a level 2 semi-private room. For an extra $1 a month, I get a full private room. Every year, they check my teeth. Every 5 years, I do a medical. Once you're over 40, it's every 2 years. I get paid to work out. Here's designated time to go to the gym. When I release, they'll cover up to $85,000 for education. I currently am at 43% of my net pay as a pension before I start collecting CPP at age 65. I have traveled the world. I've been to Ireland, Germany, England, Turkey, Afghanistan, quite a few times, Dubai. And I've seen the world. I've met a lot of interesting people. I've learned a lot from different cultures, just through my military experience. Now, we have to remember, the media likes bad news. So if it's bad, we'll sell it bad. But yes, I would encourage anyone, do it for a year. If you do it for 6 months, as long as you do it honorably, you're a veteran, and that's the most important thing. Do it honorably, because some people won't do 25 years. Some people only do 10, some people do 5. I know a few friends who've done 42 years, and then they aged out. I would encourage anyone to try it. Maybe not full-time, maybe try the reserve, do the part-time bit. But it is an opportunity in a lifetime. Yes, ma'am?
Kind of related to the same question, but
Yes.
from a different angle. What about education? You said you were 16 and a half.
Yep.
You've obviously done things that require more education.
No, I just fake it until I make it. So I was with the reserves. So when I joined at 16 and a half, I finished high school. I graduated in 2000, grade 12 with partial OAC credits before they got rid of OAC, grade 13. I've done a few educational upgrades just out of my own boredom. I've taken courses on emotional intelligence, basic emergency scene management. I'm a certified provincial outbreak systems instructor. The military's trained me on everything that I needed to do. As I progressed through my career, there is a program called the Non-Commissioned Member Executive Professional Development Program, which is a year at RMC where we take 9 credits, 5 mandatory, 4 elective, to get a certificate in Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Military Science. And then we can upgrade that to a full diploma if we want to. We also have opportunities through Algonquin College through the Defense Security Certificate and Diploma Program. Or I can submit for an independent learning plan, and the military will help offset my upgrading of education. So if I wish to attend university, I can do so while I work. But yeah, I joined right out of high school. I hated math. I did not want to go to college. I applied for RMC. They said you need calculus. I said it's math. Thanks very much. Not going to happen. And I walked away from becoming an officer. The fun part is, I teach officers. Well, you know, Sergeant Bader, I'm like, yes, sir. I understand your point of view, your legal risk manager. But one of my jobs is I actually teach the logistics officer courses, things with ground transportation. Because our jobs as senior NCMs is just not soldiers, but it's also the officer corps that we have to mentor and develop. Because they come in wet behind the ears. My old platoon commander, she was 22. She's like, Sergeant Bader, I'm like, yes ma'am. 4 years older than my son. She's like, what do I do? I'm like, thanks. I'm like, no. Lead with confidence, lead with intelligence, fair, equitable, but firm. Do what they do and do it better than them, and they will respect you. I'm 22, I'm like, yes, I know. I'm like, I got 20 years on you. She's like, it's okay. But they come in after university, they're 21 to 23 years old, and they are leading 30 to 50 people. And all they have behind them is university education with no job experience. On the job leadership training, through the school program, through RMC, but they've never truly led an organization. And let's face it, you tell an adult no, what do we do? You're done. Teaching adults is actually one of the hardest things that I do, because I have to connect, and everybody has a difference of opinion in how we see things. I've been very fortunate. Good pay. Okay, not great pay. When I first started off, it was less than $18,000 a year. I'm not going to complain right now. It's close to $100 grand after 24 years of service. Take some, you lose some. And through Veterans Affairs, I'm medically compensated as well for some of my injuries. Not all of them, but some of them. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not an expert on this, but I've heard many military experts maybe talking about current wars, etc. But they always say the logistics, you know, the success of a war being fought, it's all about the logistics. And so when I'm sitting there watching the trucks and, you know, just to supply and get everything in, and when we're talking about that, I'm sure there must be some slogans or something that
Yep.
it's all about you guys.
So the quote in the military, and you're 100% correct, is amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. If we look at what happened in the Russian-Ukraine war, the long, long line of Soviet vehicles, or former Soviet vehicles with their fuel and ammunition, somebody forgot about their logistical supply chain network. Vehicles don't run without fuel. Military marches on its stomach. And quite often, even in our own military, how are you going to get there? Well, we didn't consider that. What about food? What about medical? What about resupply? Yeah, your plan, no offense, sir. You forgot about us. Good friend of mine, Captain Jordan Webb, he's the operations officer with the Grand Central Foresters. He leads the Arctic Sovereignty mission that his brigade's been tasked with. 2 years ago, Jordan came to me. He's like, Ryan, yeah, it's good to talk to you. I'm like, yeah, it's been a couple of years, Jordan. What do you need? Well, I got to move all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's a really big conundrum. When do you need to move it by? Oh, like 2 weeks from now. Hold on, what? Hold on. All the truck drivers, we start laughing. I'm like, have you talked to the traffic techs? No. Have you talked to these guys? No. I'm like, nah. You might want to push your exercise by like 3.5 weeks. Why? Because it's going to take almost a month and a half to get somebody to support you. So what did he learn? Following year of planning for the exercise, they finished the exercise in March. In April, they started planning from a logistics standpoint. Second World War, when we couldn't secure a port far enough inland, what were we doing? The Red Ball run from the coast of Normandy all the way into Belgium. Trucks running 24/7. Huge convoys, huge amounts of freight coming in off the shoreline. It's one of the most successful logistics operations out there. Vimy Ridge campaign, if we want to talk about logistics planning, the ammunition dumping program that went into Vimy to make sure that the guns were stockpiled sufficiently for the creeping barrage was an act of logistics. The trench networks, communication subsystem, that's all logistical planning. So, the way I explain it is anybody's a logistics expert. Who goes grocery shopping? You're doing logistics. I gotta leave at this time, because if not, the signals are gonna be out. I gotta get gas, I gotta do this. What happens if it snows? All these things are logistics factors in military planning cycles. Anytime you go grocery shopping, you're actually planning a military operation on a small scale. And it's true. And when you tell a 22-year-old that, they're like, wow. I'm like, no, you cannot Uber your food into the field now. But you can order pizza. Yes.
Can I ask, sorry, just about when you were talking about the line of Russian
Yep.
coming, what happened there? Sorry again.
So as the invasion into, or incursion, if we will, entered into the Ukraine, there's massive Russian armored columns and supply columns that were overextending to a point where they were not getting resupplied to keep them moving. So they'd run out of fuel and stop on the side of the road. And from a targeted opportunity perspective, a whole bunch of military vehicles in the line.
Not running, just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. If we think back to the first Gulf War, the highway of death, when the Iraqis were retreating, it's not because of bad logistics. They were legitimately retreating and they started running out of fuel. And the American Air Force and Marine Air Force had a heyday with them. Targets of opportunity, perfectly in a line. Apache gunships, A-10 Warthogs. There goes everything on the highway. So without fuel, your tanks don't move. Then you're sitting there ready to be resupplied. And the Battle of the Bulge was very, very similar to it, because as the German armored columns punched through the Allied lines, they were trying to get to American and British and Canadian supply depots to get fuel. They overextended their supply line, making that push. Their armored columns stalled, they became sitting ducks. Battle of Falaise Gap, as the Germans were retreating out of Normandy, very, very similar. Tanks started running out of fuels, personnel carriers started running out of fuels. We're going to start using horses and carriages and anything that we can do to get out of here. But then we closed the gap, and then the Air Force had a heyday in the Falaise pocket. Because somebody didn't think about fuel, water, and food.
Well, I'm going to stop before anybody else, because I think we could keep him talking all night. Well, and that's not on you, that's on us asking the questions, because this has been a really interesting but inspiring talk, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for your service. And yeah, it's you watch war on TV, and that's just the surface really of what's going on, and we need to be reminded that there are real people out there doing these jobs on our behalf, and on behalf of hopefully peace in the end. Yeah. So because of military protocol, we cannot hand over our usual honorarium. So that is going to the Wounded Warriors Fund, which is to help vets with mental health issues and recovery from service. So we're very pleased to do that.
Thank you.
And thank you.